Alright, hello everyone, King here for another video. Uh, Before we get into this video, I just want to give a shout out to everyone and wish everyone a happy new year, happy 2022, and that this will be a year for all of us to see better days ahead of us. As you can see, I'm back to my grind, walking in my neighborhood, take care of myself, my health, mentally, physically, and spiritually. So yeah, in this video, carrying on with the theme of my previous videos, talking about my involvement in the Heir property, trying to resolve the issues, uh, dealing with the legal issues, the management issues, as well as trying to balance that between the family issues. So, without further ado, let's get into this video. Thanks for watching. Enjoy. Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'll be discussing why I decided to join the fight to help preserve and take Heir property. I got involved in 2016 along with members of my family, specifically my mother, her mother, my grandmother, and two of her siblings, one of my aunts and my uncle. So together we hired a lawyer, again back in 2016, to resolve the issue dealing with the Heir property. Reason being, when there is property known as Heir property, and there's multiple owners or heirs for property, it becomes convoluted. It becomes very hard to prove who has rights to this property by way of their bloodline. So again, in 2016, I joined this fight to resolve that issue, to put to bed the question as to who are heirs, who is not heirs, and who has rights or ownership to this property. However, again, I wasn't the first one to do this. Members of my family joined the fight or started the fight prior to 2016. However, due to life issues or unforeseen circumstances, had to step away and could not complete the task. So I joined in. Now, when I say fight, I do not mean in a physical sense, but in a legal sense, by filing a legal action known as the acquired title through the courts. And what I mean by acquired title is that essentially the original owners of the property died off, and they didn't leave wills identifying who would inherit the property, right? Who had rights to the property by way of their spouse, the children, the grandchildren, whoever. So when they died off, they didn't have a will. It became known as heir property, and that brings about a whole lot of issues, legal issues that need to be resolved. And it's going to be hard to resolve or hard to put to bed the question as to who's heirs as time goes on. So through the generations, everyone that can trace their lineage back to the original owner through the bloodline, they have rights to property, but sometimes those lines can be blurred and it'd be hard to prove who are heirs and who is not heirs. So I felt the need to step up and join the fight to preserve and protect Heir property. And one of the reasons because of the historical evidence of black land loss, especially after slavery, because slavery ended in 1865. So when ex-slaves became free men and women, free black men and women, and had the opportunity to own land, to work their own land, they experienced basically there was opportunity for people to steal a property through the predatory means, to take the land, to cheat them out of their land by way of the laws. And lots of times the black landowners didn't understand the laws. They couldn't read or write. They didn't have wills or the legal documents to prove their ownership or to prove they had rights to this property by way of their parents, grandparents, whoever. So again, as time goes on, it's hard to prove, who's the heir, who is not heir, who has rights, who don't have rights. Especially if somebody's living on the land. At times, the infighting or the disagreements or the lack of ability to prove, right, that someone has rights to property could be lost, by way of the courts. The courts can decide to sell the land, or somebody who understands the law, right, can file legal action to acquire the land through the courts. So the why for me, again, does two things. One, it ensures the land, or in this case the heir property, can be preserved and protected, as well as preserving the rights for my family as in regards to the heir property. Again, I'm talking about black land laws. So I got involved to prevent my family from losing the land due to the infighting or the lack of having legal documents to prove who they were, or who has rights, or who's who, and what's what. Um, Again, so one of the ways to do that was to follow the quater action through the courts and have everybody come to court to prove or to provide evidence or testimony that they were heirs to property, that they have rights to this property. Um, Essentially, that's what I did from 2016 to 2020, when the special referee, or the judge in this case, signed the order identifying who were the heirs to the estate by way of the quiet title. Before I get too deep into the why, I want to give a little bit of background as to how the land became heir property. If you see my other videos, if you have not, I can post the links in the description below. But I've created some other videos, made some other videos where explaining my experiences in dealing with heir property and trying to resolve the heir property, the pros and cons, the issues dealing with family and trying to resolve heir property. Because one of the main problems is that everybody, even family members, are not going to agree, are not going to fully understand as to why, as to what needs to be done and why it needs to be done. Especially, again, law. The law says X, Y, and Z, but people may not understand X, Y, and Z, or do not want to understand X, Y, and Z, do not want to agree to do X, Y, and Z. So again, there's issues with resolving or evolving heir property, and the only way to do it sometimes is to go to court. But it's unfortunate that you have to take those kind of legal action against family members due to the lack of cooperating in the infighting. So I want to take this time to briefly explain how the property became heir property. So one of my great-great-grandfathers on my grandfather's side, which is his grandfather, he and a bunch of other men and women, freed men and women, they're ex-slaves, between the years of 1884 and 1898, acquired 2 tracts of land. Right, so multiple people, about 20 or so individuals, including my great grandfather, acquired this land, 2 tracts of land between, again, 1884 and 1898. So they had this land, they had ownership of the land, they worked the land together, they lived on the land together, their families lived on the land together. Right, so it was basically a sharecropping community, a sharecropping land mixed with people that owned it and worked it and lived on it. So again, as time went on, the original owners, such as including my great-grandfather, died without a will, without naming who their heirs would be, their spouse, their children, their grandchildren, a cousin, a brother, whoever, who shall inherit the land. But most of their families were still living on the land. So over time, right, you see the problem that through the generations, whether through the bloodline or through association, individuals thought that they had rights to this property. Okay? So it became hard to prove who's who and what's what, who has rights, who don't have rights, who can live on land, who has ownership to the property. So again, this became a legal issue that needed to be resolved. And to think back that, my great-great-grandfather and his family and others, the men and women who purchased property, again, probably couldn't read and write, were not educated, didn't have access to lawyers, and didn't understand the law, and didn't have the proper legal documents to provide that evidence. So again, as time went on, it became harder and harder to prove who had rights, who was heirs to property, who were not heirs to property. Again, this is about bloodline. This has to be passed down through generations, through the bloodline, as to have ownership to the property. So this is where I came in, and not just me again, members of my family before me stepped up to get involved in trying to resolve these property issues, and they've known or knew of the issues. They know of the backstory. They know the family tree. They have this information, but again, due to lack of cooperation, lack of understanding, lack of commitment, it was hard to find a resolution. Now, if you want to know more about um, how to prevent black land loss, you can go on Google and do the research for the Center for Heirs Property that's based out of Charleston. Part of their mission is to help not only black landowners but owners, individuals who are part of an heir property, help them understand, help them utilize the tools that are out there to preserve and protect their property. So you can find more research on Google, and I may leave some links to such articles or information to include video documentaries on the subject of black land laws and how to best to preserve and protect heir property. So, in a sense, I felt the need to step up and do this because, I was brought into the fold. A lot of the information was told to me, was given to me. I heard the stories of how the property came to be. I had to learn for myself. I read through the evidence. I read through the deeds that are preserved, as well as some articles, and I did my research on the subject, which leads me to really get into the why. And I'm going to use four documents to help explain the why. Two of them are going to be articles. One article is on one of my great-great-grandfathers on my grandmother's side, so her grandfather by the name of Papa Sim. And another article that was written in coordination with one of my cousins. I'm actually his second cousin. He's first cousin to my mother, but he, along with this society that specializes in genealogy, wrote this article based on the research, based on the history of the property and the men and women that own the land and live the land and work the land, as well as other documents in the form of letters to and from lawyers explaining the law, giving legal advice as to how best to manage the property, as well as to preserve and protect it through the courts. So I'm going to share my screen so I can make this work here. So the first document is a news article that was published on Christmas Day, so December 25th, 1974. And this article is about the land, but also about Papa Sim now. Again, my grandmother's grandfather, who is one of the children of one of the original owners. So again, this article was written in a local paper, Christmas Day, December 25th, 1974, and it's titled "Son of Former Slave Recalls Bygone Plantation Years." And I have some of the sections highlighted I want to talk about. So again, I mentioned Simon Cox is his name, one of the children of the original owners by way of Toby Cox. So Simon Cox served for 24 years as president of the plantation. That's pretty big for 24 years, the time of managing the property. I'm sure that he has seen the pros and cons, the good and bad of the ideal of multiple owners owning this land, the multiple families, right? So the highlighted area you see is where it says that 20 odd ex-slaves and their families moved onto the land and farmed it and harvested timber from it in order to make the tax payments on it. The plantation was ruled by elected president, a post Cox held from 1934 to 1916. He's reported to have been a firm but benevolent ruler, a benevolent despot, some might say. So again, there it is, 20 odd ex-slaves and their families live on this land, right? So it could be not only their spouses, their children, but even their grandchildren, to include some of their brothers and sisters, right? Will be the uncles and aunts to their children, or great aunts and uncles to their children, but may not have ownership to the property, meaning that they may have not been one of the original owners who bought the property, one of the individuals, the 20 odd individuals who purchased the property, whose names are on the deed of the property. So imagine that you have family members, right? Siblings, not bloodline, but you're related by blood, but they're not your bloodline. They're not your children, they're not your grandchildren, they're not your spouse, living on the property, helping you work the fields, work the field, work the land, which is fine. But when the original owners die off, they're still there with their families. So this becomes a problem because now these individuals can claim rights to property by way of use, by living on land, saying, okay, well, yeah, there's original owners of the property, but we've been living here for all our lives. And that could be an issue later down the road, and it's proven to be an issue in some cases. Some individuals who have heir property experience that. So the only way to prevent that is to, establish who has rights to property and who does not have rights to property by a will, or producing some kind of legal documents identifying, upon our death, these are our heirs. In the next highlighted area of the article, it talks about the land is tightly bound up in legal considerations and cannot be sold. The only way rights to land can be transferred is to blood heirs of the original ex-slaves who bought the property. Again, I mentioned it, that there's issues with family members who are not along that bloodline, right? They're related by blood, but didn't purchase a property or living on the land, right? But only passed down through the bloodline through the generations, and not so much by associating the bloodline. It's passed on from generation to generation by blood, he says. He pauses for a minute as ruminating on the possibility of the unfortunate occurrence in odds. There ain't nothing to take but the tax. Meaning that, the tax is not paid, the land can be taken. Again, one of the risk associated with having heir property or owning land, period, is that if the tax don't get paid, the land can be lost. So that was a concern from him. And he goes on to say that to Cox, people, especially the young, are made the way they used to be. They lack the respect for authority, tradition, and have fallen prey to the quest for the almighty dollar. This has proven to be true in my experience in trying to resolve the legal issues dealing with the heir property. It was discovered that individuals over the generations have used the property for their own personal gain. Again, in pursuit of the almighty dollar, chasing the almighty dollar, finding ways to profit while other members of the family or others, who have rightful ownership to the property, are not profiting, haven't, didn't get a share of the profits or whatever. For instance, if there was timber harvested, the money generated from harvesting timber was not equally shared with others, or the property, the money was not well managed. Um, and at the tail end of this article, again, he identifies the issue because, again, 24 years, 20 plus years as being the president of this estate that was passed down from his father to him. Now, other men and probably even women, held a title as president prior to him. My great grandfather, uh, Papa Sim, was born in 1878. So essentially,
6 years before the first plot of land was purchased as a cooperative, with multiple owners of property. So he was born in 1878. Here it is, 1974. The man's almost 100 years old. He's seen the good, bad, and the indifference about how all of this has made it really, really hard for any person to resolve the issues. It says here, I wish sometimes he says that my daddy and them hadn't bought it together, and so it wouldn't be as mixed up as it is now. People don't think the right things, they think they can get something for nothing. Again, chasing almighty dollar, not following the rules and laws, not involving everybody into the fold, not bringing everybody into the fold, not calling meetings, not having discussions, not making well informed decisions is an issue. But the main issue is you have multiple ownership properties. So, for instance, somebody else could feel like they have a greater share, right, than the next man or woman, or their input is more important than the next man or woman, or why their idea is not good and their idea is good, or they feel like they're being slighted, feel like they don't have a say in it, their voices are not being heard. You know, People not doing the right things, people chasing the almighty dollar. Again, this was information that was brought to me. Members of my family already were that been around longer than me, that read this article, knew this article existed. They understand it. This was something that was brought to me, and just like, okay, I get it, I understand it. This needs to be done. This has to be done. The next document I'm going to share with you is a letter from a lawyer to one of the individuals. I guess, assuming at one point he, like Papa Sim, like my Papa Sim, was a president or was involved in a leadership position to help manage the property. And so Mr. Thomas Nolan, as you can see in the letter, this letter was written or addressed to Mr. Thomas Nolan in 1881. And it talks about, and this letter is from a law firm here in South Carolina, Marion, South Carolina to be exact, and is giving advice to Mr. Thomas Nolan as how to best resolve some of the issues, right? As far as in this case, this letter is talking about establishing business rules, known as bylaws. For those that are familiar with bylaws, or you're not familiar, you can do some research on that. But bylaws, right? So any organization has a set of bylaws to where there's rules on how they're going to manage or how they're going to operate to make sure things are done fair and just in good order. So this lawyer is, you see in the second paragraph there, along these lines, may I suggest that the first thing that should be accomplished is some sort of rules and regulations be established as to how the estate should be run. There should be regularly scheduled meetings, a regular set of rules or bylaws to be followed, a method of nominating new officers, a specific time to elect these officers, and a specific way to investigate whatever records the estate may have, which would be available to any heir of the estate should he or she have any questions about the way the estate is run. Again, here it is, you know, making sure things are done properly. Because you go back to what Papa Sim said in the article, that people don't think of the right things. And also in this letter, it refers to the heirs fight amongst themselves. It will have no benefit whatsoever to the heirs of the Washington James State. The only people who benefit will be the attorneys who may get involved at some later date. So here it is. This letter is basically expressing the risk associated with, you know, people not cooperating and trying to resolve their issues internally. Um, but in some cases, that's the only way to go. The only solution is to go to court. Again, the problems of having multiple owners to heir property or owning property that's come heir property is that not everyone's going to agree. especially family. And that's a sensitive subject. It's unfortunate that family are not going to agree. Family are not going to cooperate, be understanding, and be pleasant in some cases, being loving and caring, but it's necessary sometimes to resolve these issues, because especially if there is a question as to who has rights and who don't have rights, even if the individuals have been living on the property for all these years. That's why you go to court, is to make sense of everything. Make sense of everything. But at the tail end of the letter from this attorney, he says, I think that if you would try to set up the estate in some regular business-like fashion and run it according to a strict set of rules and regulations, the problems you are now having will be resolved. Again, this is in 1981. 1981. This is how many years after the article that was written about the property and about Papa Sim. So that was written in 1974. It was published in 1974. So essentially 7 years later. 7 years later, here it is. Mr. Thomas Nolan, who I assume is one of the descendants or heirs of the estate by way of maybe his father, his mother, who were one of the original owners of the property, one of the 20 odd ex-slaves. They seek legal counsel to resolve these issues. So again, another document to help push me in the right direction to be part of this fight to preserve and protect the property. Okay, so I'm going to move on to another letter. This letter was written from another law firm to members of my family, specifically two of my aunts and one of my uncles, who again are children to my grandmother and my grandfather. I say that because my grandfather is also an heir of the estate by way of his grandfather, so my great great grandfather, and then my grandmother is an heir to the estate by way of her great great grandfather. Her great grandfather, which is my great great grandfather, the father of Simon Cox or Papa Sim Cox. So in this letter addressed to my two aunts and my uncle, it's from a law firm explaining what they discovered when they did a title search on a property. So part of this is um, the process to acquire the title. So they're seeking legal counsel to help resolve or put to bed the question as to who was heirs and who was not heirs in the process of acquiring a title. So they did a title search on the property and discovered the the title as the property was transferred from ownership to ownership. Again, as you mentioned, between 1884, I mentioned between 1884 and 1898, how the land came to be. That my actually both my great great grandparents and the 18 or so other owners of the property, purchased the two tracts of land together to make up the estate now, right? So this law firm is writing this letter to my members of my family, explaining the process, explaining what needs to be done, giving guidance. Here it says the heirs. Document transfer of property. When people die, documents are often filed with the probate court. The title extractor researched the probate records looking for any documents that have been filed for any of the persons that had taken an interest in the property as a result of the deeds given by C.A. Durham and the commission of the sinking fund. Unfortunately, no probate records were found. So again, there's no evidence of the land being passed down to the children or being identified as their children being the new owners of this estate or owners of the land. So one way to resolve that is to bring about the quiet title or the clear title. And you see in this paragraph here, a lawsuit brought to establish the title or clear the land is often referred to as a quiet title action. That's essentially what me and my family did in 2016 when we hired a lawyer, is to file this kind of action to clear the title, to update the deed, and have everybody who claims to be heir to property, who know they're heirs to property, come forth to be part of this legal process. Again, going back to what I was saying, that everybody's going to agree, especially family. They're going to question it. They're going to understand why. They're going to understand the need. But the law is a law. I mean, when it comes to this, it's in black and white. It's plain and simple. And family may not understand. But in order to prevent further issues, the land being lost or being sold or stolen or just, the owners of the property having the right taken from them, the ownership right taken from them, that's the only way to do it. So it definitely gives guidance on how to resolve these issues. Again, members of my family knew about this. I was brought into the fold. This information was shown to me. These documents were shown to me. In turn, I turned over some of these documents as evidence to the lawyer that we hired, you know, to further explain why it's important, why the need to fight, preserve, and protect the property, because it's the only way to resolve it. Otherwise, as time goes on, the next generation of heirs or owners or descendants are going to be left with the same boat. Nothing's going to be resolved. Nothing's going to be resolved. And this last document here I'm going to use to further explain the why that I decided to join this fight is, again, I talked about one of my cousins, right? So he's the first cousin to my mother. I'm a second cousin. Um, and he, in doing his research, he turned over information to this genealogical society that wrote this article in 2011. So way before, like 5 years before I got involved, 5 years before I hired a lawyer in 2016 to bring about to acquire a title to resolve the issues of the Heir property. But in it, it talks about how the land came to be. As you see there, Washington James and the plantation lands describes the history of the land, who owned the land prior to him, and other men and women. Talks about his family tree, who was his spouse, who was his children when he was born and when he died, who was his relatives. It talks about all this, and it clearly identifies that there's a major issue, right? Again, I talk about as time goes on, the land has to be passed down through bloodline, right, through generations. Again, there was a mixture there where individuals living on the land claim to have rights to the property by way of, not so much by way of use, but by way of them believing, or the story was told that they're heirs to property because so and so, so and so was a father, or is their father. But this explains that not to be the case. I won't get into the details about it, but this document here really solidified what my family knew as to be true. And the only way to resolve the issues of someone having ownership or claims to the property when they're not is to go to court to resolve it, to prove to the court that, nope, members of my family, here is the bloodline of Washington James and Toby Cox, and have the other men and women, the children or the heirs descendants of the 18 odd ex-slaves, have their families or have those individuals come forward and say, well, this person is my great great grandfather, and here's how. Or this person is my great great grandmother, and here's how. And that was their opportunity to come forth and be a part of this and do this, to state their claim to the property. The lawyers told them, again, you saw the letter in 1981. Mr. Thomas Nolan went to a lawyer seeking legal guidance on how to best manage the property. But it was brought up that if the heirs can't resolve their issues, here's who's going to benefit. The heirs might benefit, but more so the lawyers are going to benefit because of the money and time and energy spent on trying to resolve these issues. And I'm going to tell you, time and money has been spent on trying to resolve these issues, and people are not cooperating. So the fight is real. The need is real. And it's going to be a matter of time before either things get resolved or my family and others who have rights to property are going to be one of the numbers, historical numbers of land being lost, land loss. It's going to add to the storyline, add to the statistic, add to history of land being lost again by black owners because of the lack of cooperation, lack of understanding, lack of knowledge of the rules and laws, or just fair to comply, fair to do what's right. So this is my why. This is my why that I decided to get involved to help preserve the property. Granted, it might cost me more than just my money, my time, my energy, in some cases my happiness, and it costs me um, family relationships. Again, because not everybody's going to understand, even if they are family, even if they're my closest cousin or aunt, uncle who I've known, since I was a young boy, who I loved and cared for, had respect for. That relationship is no longer right. I may not get that back. Them being my family member. So uh, I just wanted to share this experience with you. Hopefully, this gives you insight to why it's important to preserve property, and not so much air property, but if you own property, it's important to understand the rules and laws, to seek legal advice, legal counsel, to do your research, to understand the complexities dealing with property, in the event that if you do not have legal documentation to ensure that upon your death or will be passed down to your children, your spouse, your children's children, whoever, that this problem may arise for your generations to come. And I definitely don't think that my great grandfather, both my great great grandfather and other men and women who purchased this property, would thought we would be here today. That their descendants will be experiencing this. We're going through this legal fight to preserve and take the property, to keep it going. Um, I don't believe that's what they wanted for their children and their children's children. All they wanted was a better way of life for their children, for their family members. Again, from being ex-slaves, from being slaves to be free men and women, to owning land, to working on land, to living on land that they owned, to now that there is a legal issue with the property. Now people don't understand.
I'm not going to agree. Well, why we got to go to court? Why can't we just, because in the perfect world, yes, it makes sense. But in a legal sense, it doesn't make sense because there's going to be somebody or organization, a corporation, a business, even the government may want to acquire that land. It's going on right now down in Charleston, South Carolina. There are individuals that are part of this Heir property, and the county, the city of Charleston, wants to expand the road that runs between their property. And they had no say so because they don't have a clear title to the property. Even though they know that they're heirs of property, they're living on the land, they know the history of the land, Charleston County or Charleston City of South Carolina does not recognize them as heirs of property. Therefore, they have no rights until they come forward and say, I'm heir to property, here's how. Until they bring forth the legal action to acquire the title. So any rights they have to that land, any rights they might think they have, and go to the council meetings on the issue of expanding the road, they have none. They have none. Their voice is going to be mute until they hire a lawyer to resolve this issue, especially when there's a pot of money, because the county just can't take that property from them and not pay somebody that value that property. So that pot of money is going to sit in a trust, sit in a bank account until it's resolved. So the why is important. The why is important. And I hope I did a decent job explaining, for me, the why, by way of the documents and evidence, from my research, the information that was given to me. Again, it's unfortunate that me and my family had to pursue this kind of action, but it's necessary in some cases to end the question, to resolve the legal issues, to get the property on the right track to preserve and protect it. So I thank you for watching my video. Hope you liked the video. Please like, share, subscribe to my channel, and definitely leave a positive comment. So until next time, until next video, thanks for watching. Take care. Bye.